Your Honours, can I finish fairly swiftly, as everybody keeps saying because of the time constraints, the question of resubordination. There's no doubt many of the insider witnesses from the MUP supported the proposition that resubordination virtually occurred anywhere where there was army and police. They, of course, would say so, as we submit, out of self-interest. It deflects any attention from their activities at the time. And, of course, the defence expert, Kovacevic, about whom, Your Honours know, we have already made lengthy submissions. In fact, the OTP rely on the documents that came into existence at the time and on the evidence of what happened. Mr. Brown, as I've already mentioned, receives a barrage of criticism, much of it being through selective misquoting, particularly in the Župljanin final brief, and we say that paragraph 250 requires careful reading. But the OTP do not rely heavily on him for this aspect of the case, because, as he pointed out, it was not the focus of his report and the research which he carried out, which was on the activities of the VRS in the Krajina area during 1992, and not the nature of the relationship between the police and the military. He was, of course, asked about it, because by the stage at which he testified, the issue had become clear, which, as we say, was definitely not made clear before the start of this trial. Your Honour, we say those documents show, and we have set them out far fuller in our final brief, first, that the VRS accepted that there needed to be a request before they could have the police resubordinated. We rely on, for example, document 1D641. Then, if you want to also look at P1789 and footnote 3076. The RSMUP themselves refused or restricted requests, for example, P376. The VRS themselves distinguished between coordinated action and resubordination. The documents are set out in the footnote to our brief 3066. And the RSMUP, in its annual report, referred specifically to combat activities at the front line. Your Honours, the note is P625, page 8, also 1D406. And we invite Your Honours to look at paragraph 237 of the Župljanin final brief. Your Honour, in no document produced at the time is there any suggestion that in every activity connected with the takeovers or their aftermath in which the members of the RSMUP were engaged, that at all times and in all places they were not under the authority of their superiors in the MUP, but rather resubordinated units who were under the authority of the army. That suggestion is not made, and in fact it couldn't have been, because, as Your Honours have heard this morning, at the time of takeovers, for example, in Bielina and in Zvornik, there was no VRS, there was no Serb army, there was only the JNA, which, of course, did engage in those takeovers. Your Honour, some time is spent in both briefs on the question of town commands. Your Honours will also have seen our submission on that. We say they have almost no bearing at all on the events in this indictment. Indeed, in Kota Varos, where apparently some kind of a tone command was supposed to be established and was established. The crisis staff was operating throughout the period until November 1992, when the last stronghold of Muslim resistance, ICTY, fell to the Serbs. Now, the last topic on that I want to deal with, however, is these percentages which the defence have raised. Your Honours, the accused at various times have suggested that 80% of the RS-MUP was resubordinated at any one time, and at one stage Mr. Stanišić was suggesting to the government that there was 100% of the MUP engaged in Herzegovina, which is the Tribunal CSB, and in Doboj. And we don't have figures from Doboj, but we have figures from the other reports. And as we put them up on the screen, we hope in an attempt to assist. As the MUP, the Banja Luka year-end report, P624, and this is the document on which the percentages put by Mr. Karadžić, I believe to Mr. Machar, were taken from. And there they say it should be mentioned that 5,034 employees were engaged in combat operations for 114,529 days, and that's the basis of the 80% calculation. This works out to an average of 23 days of combat per police employee for that 9-month period. It doesn't indicate, it just says engaged in combat, and it doesn't indicate whether the police were resubordinated during these operations. We say it's made clear in other documents that resubordination and police involvement in combat are not synonymous. In addition to participating independently in combat operations, and there you have it, Your Honours, the police also made 1,593 reserve and 39 active duty police employees available to the Army of Republika Srpska. And we say there's a clear distinction being made there. Being made available, being resubordination, independently not being resubordination. Your Honour, what we say is that it shows that only 1,632 police officers, both active and reserve, from the CSB Banja Luka area of responsibility were resubordinated to the VRS during combat operations between April and December. And the rest of them were participating, whatever they may be, independently, but certainly not resubordinated. Mr. Karadžić used the CSB's December figures for active and reserve police within the CSB Banja Luka, and we say those figures as set out there, 1203 active and 5065 reserve, 31.5% of the reserve police force and 3.2% of the active police force during this period were resubordinated. And if we go to the next slide, which deals with Tribunal, which is where Stanišić was apparently saying there were 100% resubordinated, that document, which is P169, shows that the participation of active and reserve police within the CSB Tribunal in combat operations varied from month to month. That's on page 2. 483 officers participated in May, between 176 and 181 participated in July and August. So based on the October figures for the reserve, which are shown as 530, and active 192 within CSB Tribunal, that shows 67% in May, 25% in July, and 46% in October. The report doesn't indicate how they were participating, whether as resubordinated or independently. Your Honours, that's all that we wish to say about resubordination at this stage. Mr. Olmsted is going to say a little about it when he addresses you on the failures tomorrow. Your Honours, may I turn now to the role of Župljanin. Again, because of the time constraints, we are not going to go through everything that we have said in the brief about him, nor would it be of assistance, we feel, to Your Honours, who can, as I've always been told, read documents the way that I can. We say that the evidence that Župljanin knowingly and with intent played a key role in the implementation of the joint criminal enterprise is overwhelming. He and the other CSB chiefs were the intermediate level of authority between the SJB chiefs and their police, who were the actual perpetrators of the crimes, and the RS MUP top echelon. Now, on his behalf, Your Honours, and this is what we're going to concentrate on, really three aspects of Župljanin that is raised by him in the final brief. It is contended, first, he was never a member of the SDS, he never attended any of their meetings, he did not conform to the party line, and at one stage was apparently threatened. Those submissions appear in paragraphs 50, 55, and 104. Second, he was only a member of the ARC crisis staff, in brackets, ex officio, and I'll come back to that in a minute, for a matter of weeks during May, and that's paragraph 53. He never discriminated against non-Serbs, paragraph 15. He had nothing to do with the formation of the special police from the CSB Banja Luka, or the absorption into the special police of members of the SOS. He had no authority or control over the actions of the special police. That's in paragraphs 15 and 171 to 216 inclusive. He did not order his forces to participate in joint operations with the VRS. All police taking part in joint operations were resubordinated. He knew nothing about the existence of any camps, particularly those in Prijedor, until he was informed by Radulović a short time before he attended the 11th of July meeting. And finally, if he found out about crimes, he took prompt action if he was able to, but for the most part, he was unaware of those crimes. In other words, Your Honours, if one were to accept that, throughout this whole period, when Župljanin was sitting in the CSB Banja Luka, or out and about, as we know that he was, visiting the various areas within his area of responsibility, he was effectively cocooned in an ivory tower, because that's what the defence submissions amount to. Now, can I just then please concentrate on three aspects of what they say. The first is his relationship with the SDS. There is no direct evidence, unlike, as we say, in respect of Stanišić, that he was ever a member of the SDS. But we say it is clear that he shared their ideals, and in the multi-party jostling for positions in 1991, he was supported by local SDS leaders, for example, Berginin, in his capacity as president of the Chelinats SDS. and that's P1098.12. Witness ST174 believed that he was a member of the STS. Paragraph 58 of the Župljanin final brief quotes what he says at transcript page 8135, but entirely omits the previous lines of his testimony and indeed the statement he made in which he asserted that it was his belief, if not his knowledge, that Župljanin was a member of the STS, and his statement is exhibit P1098.6. He was undoubtedly in contact with both Karadžić and Plavšić in 1991. He is described as our man, and that's in P1178. And contrary to what is suggested, Your Honours, that he never attended any meetings of the STS, there is strong circumstantial evidence to suggest that he both attended the Bosnian Serb Assembly on the 26th of January with the declaration of their state, and the Holiday Inn meeting on the 14th of February. He definitely attended the Bosnian Serb Assembly in October of 1992 in Prijedor, because he is on video there, and that will be shown to Your Honours later when Mr. Hannes addresses you about Stanišić. But can I just deal with his attendance at the Bosnian Serb assemblies? Can we look first, please, at part of P1190? This is an intercept of a conversation. In fact, I think it's wrongly titled. Župljanin doesn't himself appear on the conversation. It's between Čizmović, described as an unknown male, and Karadžić. It's on the 25th of January, and there you will see that Čizmović and Karadžić, the day before the Bosnian Serb Assembly, will we see each other at the theatre? Čizmović, we will, but Stojan is asking if he should stay. Pardon, Stojan Župljanin is asking if he should stay. Should he stay on for tomorrow? And Karadžić says that would be good. And that would seem to suggest, as we say, that he was there for the 26th of January meeting. If we turn next to the 14th of February, we say there's no doubt he was there. On the 13th of February, Čizmović again, can I just remind you, Honours, Čizmović was the so-called coordinator of the regions appointed back in December of 1991 and was actually a Banja Luka lawyer, is actually a Banja Luka lawyer. Čizmović saying to Karadžić on the 13th of February, can we meet earlier tomorrow, and Stojan would like to come with me. I hope so. Where shall we look for you? At the headquarters, or Karadžić will be there. We'll have breaks, so we'll have an opportunity to get together. And this is the meeting which I reminded Your Honours of earlier this morning, where Karadžić is describing the negotiations to assembled members of the STS and the implementation of level 2 of the variant A and B instructions. Can we look now, please, at P1353.17. Those who came from outside the Sarajevo area apparently stayed at the Holiday Inn. A number of people. This is one of the receipts, and we say that receipt is that for Mr. Župljanin. So we say it is untrue to assert that he never attended any of their meetings.
Is there a date?
Is there
a date indicated on the bill?
Yes, do you see to the right-hand side, Your Honours, says arrival 14 to departure 15-2.
And we also have wrong translation as well. It's Župljanin, not Župljanin.
Sorry?
Sorry, and we also have wrong translation. It said he is in original Župljanin, not Župljanin.
Yes, well, so that's the... Thank you. We then come to the 2nd of March and the barricades incident in Sarajevo. Could we have a look, please, at P981? This is a conversation between Župljanin and then Stanišić. And if we go, who's called by, apparently appears to be his nickname, Stole, and Župljanin tells him, we are listening to how things are going over there. We are waiting for further instructions. Stanišić says, you are in contact with this policy of yours, aren't you? Well, all right, now be ready. For the most part, everything is ready on our side. Yes, Župljanin, we are waiting for the sign. If a total blockade is needed, or the rest, it will be done. Agreed. Now, as we say, this shows that even if not a formal member of the SDS, he was, certainly by March, a party to the planning that was going on, and indeed from February, at least, for the meeting. Now, his membership of the ARC crisis staff. Now, Your Honours, even before the announcement of the ARC crisis staff, Župljanin was in fact attending and reporting to the ARC assembly, and that's P2061. He is listed as a member of the ARC crisis staff on the document P556 and indeed in the Gazette that was published of all the ARC decisions up to June. Now, the defence position on his membership of the ARC crisis staff, I think the fairest way of putting it is to say it's vacillated somewhat. In the pre-trial brief, at paragraphs 18, I'm just going to find it, I hope. This is the supplementary pre-trial brief that was filed on the 31st of July 2009. And they say, at paragraph 18, Mr. Župljanin also takes issue with the allegation that he was an active member of the ARC crisis staff and instrumental in the implementation of the alleged plan. In reality, his role was minor, and he did not have any influence upon the ARC crisis staff, which was directed and controlled by Radovan Karadžić. At paragraph 25, it is said the crisis staffs, war presidencies, and war presidencies, I think they mean war staff, were interchangeable nomenclatures for the same institution. Well, interestingly enough, Your Honour, that's not what was being put to Miss Hansen, who testified about this. What was there being put was that they were completely different institutions. Indeed, I think at that stage when this was being dealt with, I actually got up and asked, it's fair to say it was Mr. Pantelic, whether the suggestion was by the defence that there was a totally separate body called the war staff from the ARC crisis staff, which was simply Mr. Burgeon alone without any participation by Mr. Župljanin. Is that the suggestion? And the answer was yes, that is my suggestion. And that is at T4647. The paragraph 25 of the pre-trial brief goes on to say, Mr. Župljanin takes issue with the contention that the ARC crisis staff issued decisions which were sent to municipal crisis staffs and put into effect. The municipal crisis staffs were neither charged to do so, nor did they do so in fact. Well, as your honours will see in the brief now, there's a change because it said not originally, but later on the ARC crisis staff did have power over the municipal crisis staff. And finally, at paragraph 33, they repeat the suggestion that Mr. Župljanin's role in that organ was negligible and his acts and conduct did not have any impact on the creation of either orders and decisions or the outcome alleged. It is now said that, in fact, he was only a member of the ARC crisis staff for the period of May. That's what asserted. There is absolutely no evidence at all that that is, in fact, the situation. The ARC crisis staff went from May until the 17th of July, and there's nothing to suggest that Župljanin, as various witnesses have attested, did attend those meetings of the crisis staff as a member. The words ex officio are used in both of the accused briefs. My understanding, or our understanding of ex officio, is that by virtue of the characteristics inherent in the holding of a particular office, you hold an appointment without need of specific authorization or specific appointment. In the case of the SJB chiefs and Župljanin, they were on the crisis staff by direction of the government. Can we look briefly, please, at P70? This is Đerić's order. The crisis staff consists of members, each of whom has his own responsibilities, the president, etc., head of the MUP. It is not clear either, your honours may think, why, whether it was by order or ex officio, it makes the slightest difference. These SJB chiefs, these MUP chiefs, were participating in the crisis staff for the reason that the Bosnian Serb leadership saw the crisis staffs as the best means of achieving their ends by their coordinating factor between the military, political, which had the goals, the police and the military who carried them out. Your Honours, the ARC crisis staff, as we say, operated between the 6th of May and the 17th of July. That was the vital period for the actions that took place within the Autonomous Region of Krajina. Contrary to what is asserted in paragraph 114 of the Župljanin brief, the Assembly of the Autonomous Region did not meet between April and July of 1992. It met on the 17th of July when it verified most, if not all, of the ARC crisis staff decisions, and that's P1827. Moreover, Your Honours, whether called the crisis staff or the war staff or the war presidency, the composition remained the same. And everybody called it the crisis staff, including the people on it. Your Honours saw briefly a part of the clip of the video P204. Can we just look at the earlier part where we see the interviews, please, of three of the major players in the Kota Varos action?
Ja ovom prilikom želim da istaknem da smo naišli na izuzetnu saradnju i među tim ljudima, ali nažalost imali smo i u dva sela gdje smo uspjeli da se dogovorimo, ali smo doživjeli da je iz tih sela otvorena paljba na jedinice Ministarstva unutrašnjih poslova Srpske Republike Krajine i pripadnike moje jedinice.
Can I just pause there to note that certainly Lieutenant Colonel Polic, who's been interviewed there, is distinguishing between the units of the MUP and the units of the army. Yes? In the next clip, please.
Gospodine Brđanine, recite nam koji su razlozi vašeg dolaska i kako ocjenjujete posljednje događaje na području Kotorvaroške opštine?
Da vam kažem, moje obaveze kao predsjednika kriznog štaba autonomne regije da obiđem sva ratišta. Moram priznati da sam najčešće bio na koridoru, na prolazu za Srbiju, ali jednostavno razlog dolaska je taj što moram izvijestiti svakog ponedjeljka sve predsjednike kriznih štabova kakva je politička situacija na ovom području. Mi moramo očistiti naše područje gdje svakako spada i Kotorvaroš, Jajce, a najvažnija je bitka koja se vodi, koju sam jučer posjetio, to je prodor za Srbiju. Jednostavno vidimo i sami da više nema pregovora sa onima koji sa nama ratuju. Oni koji su uzeli oružje u ruke moraju biti poraženi, predati ga i ovdje mora zavladati totalna srpska.
I od strane političkih struktura traži da se preuzmu sve mjere da se izbjegne eventualno konfliktne situacije gdje bi moglo da dođe do rušenja objekata, gdje bi moglo da ginu ljudi i tako dalje. Međutim, moram reći da druga strana, bar djelimično, je prihvatila takvu našu aktivnost, ali jedan broj ekstremista se odmetnuo i on ne želi da se stavi pod kontrolu, niti želi da vrati oružje.
Yes. There we see the three components together: the army, the political, and the police from the Autonomous Region of Krajina acting together on the ground to take over Kotovaroš and rid themselves of those who did not wish to accept Serb control. The importance of Župljanin's presence on the ARC crisis staff can be seen from some of the matters that were discussed in the meetings. Could we have up, please, P441? First of all, we see the decision on the formation of the crisis staff, the war staff, as printed, shall be, and we see Župljanin. The other members were, of course, Talić, Stevandich, and other persons who, Your Honours, have heard about. Then can we go, please, to the next decision? This is the we haven't got the date up, have we? I think it's April. Just a moment. It must be the beginning of May. I'm sorry, Your Honours, we should have put the date onto this. It's the first document was the 5th of May, and this one is, yes, it's the 11th of May, Your Honours, I'm sorry. The deadline of the surrender of weapons. Who will be dealing with what happens after the deadline? The weapons will be confiscated by employees of the Security Services Centre. Obviously important that the chief of the Security Service Centre was there to discuss with the other members of the crisis staff whether that was possible and whether they should be doing it. Then next, Your Honour, can we look at the 13th of May? On the 16th of May, a delegation consisting of Krepešnin, Erceg-Berjanin, Radic, Sajic, who was the National Defence Secretariat, Župljanin, and others to hold talks in Knin with representatives of the RSK in establishing links in information and the economy. And then the security services in Banja Luka is to fully implement the decisions of the crisis staff on the disarming. Next, can we look, please, at next clip. This is the 18th of May. A delegation, again, Krasnin, Herzeg, Sajic, and Župljanin, to go to Pale and hold talks on defining the territory towards Simberia. I think that's all that I need. Thank you. Your Honours, Župljanin himself was fully aware of the importance of the ARC crisis staff as the coordinating body for the establishment of the Serb state. Can we have a brief look, please, at P367? Your Honours, this is the meeting that took place on the 6th of May. In fact, it wasn't the report or the document recording it, not produced till the 20th of May. And it contains a number of themes which we say are important when you consider Župljanin's authority. All my orders, conveyed orally as well as those I may forward by dispatch, must be carried out. They are your law. And then it goes on about the chain of command. In all our activities, we are obliged to observe all measures and apply all procedures ordered by the crisis staff of the Autonomous Region. And then disarmament. We take no action until the crisis staff makes the relevant decisions. It's important that we solve the problem comprehensively. You know, again, we see over and over again in the documents produced at the time that as far as was possible, there was to be a comprehensive and collaborative solution to the problems. And finally, this, Your Honour, which goes on to deal with the next topic I want to cover. The chief of the CSB informed the members of the council that he, not the army, he had established a special counter-sabotage and counter-terrorist police unit of about 150. The unit is made up of both active and reserve police and persons who fought on Slavonia battlefronts. The unit is equipped with the most up-to-date combat equipment. Its founding will be celebrated in Banja Luka at a special ceremony marking Security Forces Day on Tuesday, the 12th of May. Now, Your Honour, for some reason this has become of some importance in respect of Mr. Stanišić, because, to be fair, there's been some confusion about it, largely because of the glass article on the parade, which was dated the 14th, seemed to refer back to the 13th. But every other document in this case, including the video of the parade, shows that it took place on the 12th in the late afternoon after the Serb assembly had concluded. Stanišić, in his final brief, asserts that it took place on the 13th and that he drove there and back again. However, there we have, in one short document, all these themes, as it were. And as we say, and we've set it out again in our brief, that the decisions made by the ARC crisis staff, in particular those relating to disarmament and dismissals, were forwarded by Župljanin for action to his subordinate SJBs. Now, may I then move to the special police and or the SOS? The evidence of Župljanin's participation in the formation of forces used to implement the common plan, his command and his control of those forces, the crimes committed by those forces, is fully set out in our final brief. We say it is the strongest possible evidence, and the defence attempts to negate it through the final brief, this is the Župljanin final brief, through selective, we say, quotation and omission demonstrates just how powerful it is. Paragraph 172 of the Župljanin final brief starts in its recital of facts on the special police with the ARK decision of the 27th of April. It utterly omits Župljanin's announcement of the formation of the special police on the 15th of April. That was an announcement made to Glass newspaper, and it's P542. It is asserted in the brief that the SOS was brought in to the special police against Župljanin's wishes and completely as a result of negotiations between the army and the SOS. Could we have up for a moment, please, P552? This, again, is an article of an interview, an article in Glass containing an interview with Župljanin, and he states, as to the Serbian, the SOS, which were placed under the jurisdiction of the Security Services Center by the Assembly decision, Župljanin said a large number of these units' members, being reliable and experienced fighters, would be tested for engagement in the special detachment, while others would be assigned to the reserve police and the Krajina TO. The SOS would thus virtually cease to exist. And P560, please. This is Glass interviewing Župljanin on the 12th of May and actually asking him a question about the special detachment. And what he has said, what he says is this, that this will be an elite unit in the middle of, equipped with combat vehicles, helicopters, and other contemporary equipment and weaponry, and so on and so forth. If it is necessary for the detachment to fight together with the army, it will be made available. It virtually beggars belief how it can be asserted in the light of all the evidence that this was an army unit that had no connection with and was not under the control of Župljanin, and indeed that was resubordinated. Then he talks again about the parade on Tuesday, and then he said this is the first time that security. Can we have the next? I think it's the next. Was that? That's it. Oh well. Your Honours can see the whole article in any event. P560. Now, Your Honours, the crimes. Actually, I think I just want to. I've got the intercept. Yes, sorry. I'm skipping something. Your Honours, the identification, the IDs of the special police were signed by Župljanin. That's in 2D72 at page 9. Your Honours, at paragraph 174 of the final brief for Župljanin, it is said that, and for most of what is said, they rely on the evidence of witness SZ02. I can't remember whether he was in closed session or not, so I'll just stick to it. That although they may have formally appeared to be police officers because they were issued IDs by CSB Banja Luka, in essence, they were a military unit. Again, Your Honour, at the time, Your Honours may have thought the logic behind this is not apparent why the IDs should have been signed by Župljanin for a unit that had nothing whatsoever to do with him. In paragraph 179, when dealing with why Župljanin made the request for the military to provide the arms that he talks about and the equipment, it is said this was merely for logistical expedience, as the structures were in place at the CSB as a regional centre to facilitate the delivery of such equipment. Now, leaving aside that there's not one iota of evidence that's why the request was made, how was it logistically more expedient for the army to take its equipment from its own headquarters in Banja Luka and transport them over to the CSB for a unit that was going to be a military unit? As I say, it defeats all logical thought. Your Honours, the 12th of May parade, Your Honours, we say it's absolutely clear from the evidence you've already seen that it took place on the 12th of May. And, Your Honours, there's one other piece of evidence which deals with that, which we'd like, Your Honours, to this time listen to. It's an intercept. It's P1124, and it is dealt with in the brief for Župljanin as follows. We say this intercept again goes to a number of different themes. The paragraph 61 says the prosecution's probable reliance on Župljanin's intercepted conversation with Čedomir Klaić on the 7th of May to try and depict Župljanin's character as anti-Muslim is far from the mark. This is when they're asserting that some of his best friends were non-Serbs. It is clear from the conversation that they, that is Klaić and Župljanin, enjoyed a personal friendship, and this is reflected in the jovial and sarcastic comments recorded. The jokes in that conversation were no doubt in poor taste, but they were made in jest and were undoubtedly a response to the unique strains both individuals were labouring under at the time. Leaving aside, there is no evidence of what strain, if any, either of these two men were labouring under. We think that Your Honours might like to hear some of the conversation as they spoke it. It's fair to say the microphone was obviously in Klaić's office, and Župljanin is fainter. And that, may I say, Your Honours, what you see on the screen is a still from the parade, which we'll look at. Župljanin in front, Klaić behind.
Stojani, kako si, brazeru? Šta ima? Šta je da je se poznao? Kakav si, brazeru? Ozbiljno? Kad ga čuješ, pozdravi ga, reci da sam živ i zdrav, da prenese roditeljima gore, bratu i staro i tako. Jeli? Pa stvarno ja vinka. Znači, on nije smio ostaviti ništa njima, jevi. Aha. Kakva situacija među ljudi? Jel' je? Aha.
Next.
Jel' je? Aj, jebi ga, šta će. Znači, ono što je bilo malo, kao komplikovalo se prošlo bez problema. Super, pa dobro. Nisam ja stari Ukrajine, nikad nisam najevio. Ja znam da to je naš narod, da tu ne vre falt nikad je.
You know, I was looking at the conversation. You may think that the humour of what they were discussing is not apparent. Would you also give me just 1 minute? Your Honours, we invite Your Honours to read through the whole transcript, because there we see, we've only, because it takes a little longer to play it, there is conversation about what should be done in Sarajevo, with Župljanin indicating what he thinks ought to be done. And that's at pages 4 and 5 of the Intercept. And at the end, there's a conversation about the Banja Luka parade. This is the 7th of May. Čedo Kljić is invited by Župljanin and the minister, and the question is whether the minister can fly, and there's a discussion about helicopters. And there's also a long discussion about Serbian members of the MUP, of the new MUP, who are not doing what they ought to be doing. Can we now look, please, at some of the video from the parade, which is P1393. Your Honours will see on the screen, it's clearly the 12th of May, and the part of the speeches that were made. You may have missed that. It's the date. I want this on screen. If we just pause, we'll see identification later. We've identified some of the other participants, but that is behind Župljanin, Čedo Kljić, appearing and disappearing with the moustache. Use of the trophy. This is the end of the Bosnian Serb Assembly. And I think we'll see Župljanin saying this speech. We're waiting for that. There's going to be identification of the various people in a minute. I say that. The version I saw stopped the film at various points and you saw the various participants identified. Maybe it's this point. No. All right, I think, can we just, we'll have to replay this clip. Version. Okay. Can we go back to, I'm sorry, it's taking time, but I think we need to do this. well, there had to be one moment when techniques went wrong. Your Honours, can I we'll come back to that once Mr. Van Hooydonck's found the right bit. Your Honours, as far as the special police are concerned, we say that the crimes committed by the special police were well documented, particularly in Kotovaros. Your Honours, in paragraphs 193 to 5, the defence of the Župljanin final brief, as I say, heavily criticised Mr. Brown for what Your Honours may recall was a misunderstanding between a document that was issued by the first Krajina Corps at the beginning of July, which Mr. Brown, admittedly helped along, unfortunately, by me, assumed related back to the killings outside the health centre in June. And he is heavily criticised. It's described somewhat slangily in paragraph 193 as scuppered by the prosecution expert Brown. And, Your Honours, it is suggested that Brown agreed that there had not been a killing outside the health centre. That, if Your Honours read the relevant evidence of Mr. Brown, you will see that couldn't be further from the case. He accepted that he had misread the first Krajina Corps document, which related apparently, as it says, to the killings of some special police which took place later, quite clearly, but the killings outside the health centre, contrary to the defence assertion, I'm not altogether clear whether they actually mean it, did take place, and indeed the witness who survived the killings, who saw them, was never cross-examined on the basis that those killings did not take place. Your Honours, as far as the remainder of the evidence is concerned, which shows Župljanin's control over the special police, he ordered their release from custody. All that's said in the pre-trial brief is he didn't order that they weren't to be prosecuted. Well, Your Honours can deal with that one, I'm sure. He did all that he could in August to prevent them being disbanded. And, Your Honours, finally, we say, the defence undermines its whole argument on this matter, because in paragraphs 200 and 201, they say this, and this is the first sentence. The defence maintains that when Župljanin was made aware of accusations against the Special Police Unit, he, brackets, notwithstanding his lack of authority over the unit, refused to allow such allegations to go unaddressed. In other words, he went, says the defence, this wasn't a unit over which he had any control. It was a military unit, but given, however arduous his tasks were controlling those who were under his command, he went out of his way to try and address their crimes. And we say that in itself undermines everything. I don't know whether we're in a position to play. Yes, as I gather we are. If we can just look. And I think, well, although there was more, I think that will suffice. You know, as we say, there was the classic bringing together again of all the components to the joint criminal enterprise. Your Honour, the reality, we say, is this. One uses the modern word, a reality check. Župljanin, the evidence shows, conformed and controlled the special police, the CSB Banja Luka Special Police. It was his own personal contribution, additional to the RS MUP members he already controlled through his position, to the forces which implemented the takeovers. That the police took part in the takeovers, as you've heard, is clear from the witness testimony and from the reports prepared by the MUP themselves. Your Honour, finally, can I deal with the question of detention facilities and Župljanin, because we cover this aspect very fully in the final brief. But the assertions are made in the Župljanin final brief that all detention facilities were the responsibility of the army, as the MUP was not allowed to guard them. I've already dealt with the missing logical progression in that. That Župljanin was unaware of their existence until shortly before July the 11th meeting. It's paragraph 299, and that he took an initiative to form a commission and accordingly was instrumental in the closure of Amasca and Keretan. That is paragraphs 286 and 312. Your Honours, in the light of that, it's necessary very shortly to rehearse some of the evidence. We say that that evidence shows that the incarceration of the non-Serbs in these camps and the subsequent removal from the area was a primary method of achieving the objective of the Bosnian Serb plan. Of the 22 detention facilities, as Mr. Demerjen has already shown you, that are listed in the indictment, only one of them was under the jurisdiction of the VRS, but it was the police, as your Honours know, who brought the majority of the prisoners to Manjača, Ključ and Sanski Most in particular. They took part in the interrogations and the classifications in Manjača. So they and guarded some of the facilities. So although it was a military camp run by Lieutenant Colonel Popovic, the police too had an input into that. When Amasca was established in May, Drilacha sent a copy of his order about Amasca to the CSB in Banja Luka. That is P1560. So it is really not possible for Župljanin to say he was unaware of the establishment of these camps. And on the 13th of June, Drilacha wrote to Župljanin complaining about the treatment that was being meted out by the special police. That's P659. It's very interesting that Drilacha, who's supposed to be this rogue, this person over Župljanin had no control, virtually is one of the more assiduous reporters of matters to Župljanin of any of the SJB chiefs. By June, Radulovic was warning his superiors in the SNB that the International Red Cross was really exhibiting increasing interest in visiting the collection centres. That's P1391. So again, that's before he actually spoke to Župljanin about it. And in June, the same month, Muslim representatives held a meeting with General Talic about what was going on in Banja Luka, the persecutions and the detention facilities. That's P45919. And there they complained to General Talic, and General Talic at the end of that meeting, if we can perhaps go to the next slide, no, sorry, that's, I thought it was on there, but in fact he tells them he will write to Župljanin about the other collection centres over which the army has no control. I was at the July 11 meeting. It is said in the brief that as a result of his submissions at that meeting, conditions improved, and Prijedor was eventually closed down. If one looks, please, very briefly at page 7. His actual complaint is that the army and crisis staffs, our war presidencies, are requesting that as many Muslims as possible are gathered, and they are leaving these undefined camps up to the internal affairs organs. And he goes on to say conditions about it. At no stage does he say, this is all the army, and we should insist that these camps are closed down. It was from the moment, in fact, that the camps became known to the international community, the MUP tried to shift responsibility to the army, and you will see that in P1818. Not once in the final brief is there any mention that, in fact, as everybody knows, the reason that these camps were closed down was the visit by international reporters, and to assert, as Župljanin asserts, that it was his action at the 11th of July which was responsible, and indeed his subsequent commission, Your Honour, is, again, we say, without any foundation at all. Indeed, by the time the internationals got there on the 6th of August, Keretam had already been closed, and most of the Amasca prisoners, as we saw in that clip, had been moved to Ternopily. Before that happened, Župljanin had visited Amasca on no less than 2 occasions. And, Your Honour, the report, the Commission report, which covers only 3 out of the municipalities under his control, which on his order had to be completed in 3 days, Your Honours may think was nothing more than a whitewash, that report being P602. Your Honours, obviously, we've had to allocate the time, and I've reached the end of what we say about Župljanin. The defence rely, when I say what we say about Župljanin, obviously we've had a great deal more to say in what we wrote. The defence rely very heavily on the document that he sent on the 30th of July, where he was apparently saying that the police should not be taking orders from crisis staffs and the like. Your Honours will look at the document. It's 2D25, and you may think that the reason for sending it is possibly quite clear, that there were a lot of complaints coming about from the Serbs themselves about the behaviour of the police. And it was a document, we suggest, when you read the whole thing, is no more than, as it were, shifting responsibility. There's no clear instruction given. There's no resume of what it is in detail that they are complaining about. And the one document, perhaps, that we should look at is one that he sent on the 20th of July to the MUP headquarters, which, needless to say, I don't think I've made a note of, but, Your Honours, it's... no, I have to come back to that, and I may mention that tomorrow. Your Honours, finally, on the question of intent, the defence say that Župljanin was never heard to say anything discriminatory against non-Serbs. In fact, the theme that comes out very strongly from a number of witnesses who spoke to Župljanin and complained to him about what was happening was effectively there was nothing he could do. Well, Your Honours, he wasn't a Berjanin, he wasn't a Vukic, he wasn't a Kalinic. He didn't use words in the way that they did to drive out those who were terrified. But we say if you look at his actions, they have no other explanation but of his wholehearted endorsement of and mixing with involvement in the Bosnian Serb plan. Your Honours, we've got 5 minutes, but whether it's worth Mr. Hannes starting, I don't know.
I agree with this. So, but before we take the adjournment for the day, with regard to the prosecution's request seeking leave to file a written motion to address what it argues are errors of law in the defence trial briefs, the trial chamber notes that the prosecution has had an opportunity to make its submissions on the law in its final trial brief. Moreover, the chamber has granted the parties an additional hour for their closing arguments in order to give the parties more time to attend to what was raised in the final trial briefs. For these reasons, the chamber denies the prosecution's request. So we take the adjournment to tomorrow morning.
All rise, we will